Picture the greatest empire on earth. Now picture the family that lives at the bottom of it. The ones the empire rests on like a foundation stone rests on soil. Pressed down, cold, never seen from the outside. Now give them a kitchen, a room about the size of a generous closet. Stone floor, black with grease and decades of accumulated use. One window that looks onto a shared courtyard full of other people's sounds and other people's smells. A hearth that eats firewood faster than you can afford to buy it and produces more smoke than heat. A clay pot, the main pot, the central pot, the pot the whole day rotates around, cracked on one side, held together by a loop of wire someone wrapped around it 3 years ago and never replaced because replacing the pot would cost money you don't have, and the wire works well enough for now. That's the kitchen. No running water, no pantry. A shelf with 6 things on it. A clay jug, a jar of lard with maybe a finger's width of white fat left inside, a small wooden box of salt, half a head of garlic starting to dry and wrinkle, a cloth bag containing a handful of dried chickpeas, and one onion that's been sitting there so long it's grown a green shoot pointing hopefully toward the ceiling. That's the shelf. That's everything. What's not on the shelf is the actual story. No pepper, no cinnamon, no sugar, no fresh meat, no cheese, no bread. Not yet, because bread comes from the baker on the corner, and the baker doesn't open until the bells ring, and the bells haven't rung yet. And even then, bread costs money, and money is a problem you solve again from the beginning every single morning of your life. No butter, never butter. Butter is for a different neighbourhood entirely. This is Madrid in the year 1650. The capital of the Spanish Empire, the city from which Philip IV rules half the known world, from the silver mountains of Peru to the spice islands of the Pacific, from the forests of New Spain to the ports of the Philippines. The city of Velázquez, who right now is painting portraits in the Alcázar that will hang in museums 4 centuries from now. The city of Calderón de la Barca, whose plays are filling the corrales de comedias 3 streets away. The city of the Auto da Fe and the Plaza Mayor and the grandest religious processions in Christendom, and you are standing in a kitchen the size of a closet before dawn, holding a clay pot that weighs almost nothing because there is almost nothing in it, trying to work out how to feed 5 people on what's left on that shelf. Good night. Well, not quite yet. I make these history stories, and I genuinely don't know what combination of circumstances led to me sitting here, talking about 17th century Spanish poverty at whatever hour this is for you. If you're using this to sleep, I completely understand. If you're using this because you can't stop your brain and you need something to fill it with, I understand that more. Either way, put the phone down, find a comfortable position, close your eyes. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness. Not the soft darkness of a room with curtains. Not the orange-edged darkness of a city at night. True darkness. The kind you only get in a room with no glass in the window. Just a wooden shutter pulled closed against October air, and no candle lit, because candles cost money you don't spend until you have to. For a moment, half a breath, maybe less, you've forgotten where you are. Then your nose tells you. It hits you in layers the way it always does. First, smoke. Not fresh smoke. Not the alive smell of something burning right now. Old smoke. Smoke that has been here so long it's become part of the room, worked itself into the plaster and the wood beams and the rough wool of every blanket in the place and the weave of your own hair. This smoke has a specific character. It's made of olive oil gone slightly rancid, of dried legumes boiled for hours, of onion skins thrown in for extra flavour when there was nothing else to add. It's the smell of 1,000 meals that were never quite enough. Under that, garlic, raw and insistent. Someone crushed a clove against the stone wall last night. You, actually, while you were making supper, and the smell is still alive this morning, sharp and almost aggressive, the one smell in this room that hasn't gone tired. Under that, the smell of 5 people sleeping in 3 rooms, which is to say, bodies, breath. The wooden box in the corner that serves as a chamber pot and needs to be emptied into the street gutter before the day gets any older. Hair not washed in 2 weeks, not because anyone is careless, but because washing hair requires hot water, and hot water requires fire, and fire requires wood, and wood requires money, and you make decisions in this household about where money goes, and hair falls below bread in the hierarchy. Always bread first, everything else after, and beneath all of it, permeating everything, impossible to separate from the other smells, because it has been here longer than any of them, the smell of the city itself. Which is to say, the smell of 80,000 people, and their animals, and their work and their waste. All of it rising from the cobblestones below, and seeping through every crack in every shutter, in every building, in every street of Madrid. Welcome to the Corral de las Flores, in the parish of San Millán, on the south side of the city, in the kingdom of Castile, in the year of our Lord 1650. You are Catalina Fernandez, 19 years old, eldest daughter. You've been living in this corral since you were 4 years old, when your family arrived from Extremadura, from a village so dry and so poor that leaving it felt like rescue, though the rescue was more complicated than anyone told you it would be. You swing your legs off the pallet you share with your sister Anna, who is 12 and still curled up with her knees to her chest, her dark hair fanned out across the rough blanket. The pallet is on the floor, not on a frame, just on the floor, because a bed frame means wood and wood means money, and right now the money is needed for other things, for food, for the aguador who comes twice a day, for the rent that is due in 12 days and which your father is slowly, painfully working his way toward. Your feet hit the cold stone floor and it is cold, really cold. Madrid is on a high plateau in the centre of Spain, 650 metres above the sea, and in October the cold rolls down from the Sierra de Guadarrama to the north like it has an intention. Not like a cold front on a map, like something physical and personal, something with weight, pressing through the walls and the shutters and the thin wool of your blanket and into your bones while you sleep. Summers here are brutal, winters are crueler. October is the month when you realise winter is serious, and whatever preparations you haven't made yet are now urgent. You don't have slippers. You pull on your alpargatas, rope-soled sandals, not much better than nothing for warmth, but better than the splinter you got in February, and you move into the kitchen. The kitchen. The hearth is the first thing you look at. You always look at the hearth first. The coals from last night are out. You crouch and push the ash around with the stick. Grey powder, nothing orange, nothing warm. Cold hearth on a cold morning is its own kind of misery. Nothing dramatic, just the particular heavy feeling of a problem that needs solving before anything else can happen. You look at your wood. A bundle of sticks leaning against the wall, thin ones. 7. You count them twice. 7 sticks, plus the small pot of charcoal you keep for genuine need. This is the last of what you bought Monday from the leñatero, who comes through San Millán twice a week with his cart. Friday is when your father gets paid, and today is Wednesday. And 7 sticks is not Wednesday and Thursday for a family of 5. You make a note of it in the part of your mind that keeps track of everything. This is a running inventory you maintain without paper, without anyone asking you to, without anyone thanking you for it. You know what's on every shelf in this apartment. You know what's in every jar and bag and pot. You know when things are running low before they actually run out, and you start thinking about solutions in advance, the way you're thinking right now. 7 sticks. Have to be careful. Have to cook efficiently today. Have to talk to your father tonight about the leñatero. You take 3 sticks and build the fire. You've been doing this since you were 7 years old enough to hold the flint without cutting yourself, and now at 19 it happens in your hands without needing to pass through thought. Shreds of dried moss from the little clay pot on the shelf. A twist of old rag. Flint against the steel. Once, twice, 3 times, 4. The spark catches the moss and you cup your hands around it, blowing gently, adding twigs, adding the first small stick, shielding the whole fragile thing from the draft, coming through the gap in the shutter until it decides to live. Fire. Just a small finger of orange at first, uncertain, feeling out the world, then growing, settling, finding its confidence. The room is still cold, but now it's going to be warm. That's a different thing. You watch it for a moment. You always do. There is something about fire that pulls the eye, something older than any city or empire or kingdom, something that says warmth and food and made it through the night. Even in a kitchen this small, in a building this poor, watching a fire catch from nothing is not a small thing. Then the fire is going and you have to think about the food. You go to the shelf. You know exactly what's there. You checked last night. You check again now anyway, because this is how you live. You inventory what you have the way a general counts his troops before battle. Exactly. Without sentiment. The chickpeas. 2 handfuls, maybe a little more in the cloth bag. Dried. They've been sitting there since Sunday when you bought them from Signora Murillo in the courtyard below, who buys legumes in bulk and sells small quantities to the women on your floor. Dried chickpeas need to soak overnight. You put them in water the night before, and by morning they're swollen and soft and cook faster and more evenly. You did not soak them last night, because last night when you finished cooking supper and cleaning up and getting Anna to sleep and checking on your mother who's been coughing for a week, you forgot. It was a mistake. Small things. The day is made of small things, and the days are hard, and sometimes you forget. No soaking means longer cooking, means more wood, means more water. You note this. The half head of garlic. 5 cloves left. This is better than you thought. Garlic in this kitchen is not a flavouring, or not only a flavouring. Garlic is a strategy. Garlic makes almost everything taste like something worth eating. Garlic goes in the pot with the chickpeas and the onion, and when the smell rises up through the water and out through the lid, when the whole room fills with that dense, warm garlic and legume steam, everyone in the apartment feels like they're about to eat a real meal. That matters. Feeling like you're about to eat a real meal matters almost as much as the meal itself. The onion. You pick it up. You pinch off the green shoot. Set it on the windowsill. If you have an extra clay pot somewhere, you can plant the shoot and grow more onion slowly over weeks. You've been meaning to do this for 3 weeks. The lard jar. You tip it toward the faint light from the fire. A finger's width. A little more than that. White and solid from the cold, pressed against the interior of the clay. Precious. This is not olive oil, which the merchant up on the Calle Mea uses in his kitchen, which the households you sometimes work for on the other side of the city use, and which you can smell, rich and green, through their kitchen doors. This is lard, rendered pork fat. Bought cheap from the carnicero on Fridays when he sells his offcuts. Lard is what gives food its gravity. Without some kind of fat, food is just hot water with things floating in it. And hot water with things floating in it doesn't stay with you. It doesn't fill the hollow space. Lard fills the hollow space briefly, imperfectly, but enough. Salt. The wooden box. You shake it. Enough. Salt is managed the way everything is managed here. Carefully, with one eye on tomorrow. That is the shelf. Chickpeas, garlic, 1 onion, lard, salt. No bread. Not until the baker opens. No meat. Your father might bring something home. Your father works at the market, the Rastro, as a carrier and occasional labourer, and sometimes on slow days the butchers will give out bones and offcuts to the men who work there, heavy with the marrow and the connective tissue that makes a broth thick and sustaining. And if your father comes home with even 2 or 3 bones today, the pot will be transformed. But you don't count on it. You plan for the shelf as it is. No other vegetables. There were dried figs, a handful, bought Tuesday, but they are gone. You know who ate them? You're not going to mention it. So, chickpeas, onion, garlic, lard, salt, and whatever else the day delivers. You look at the cracked clay pot. You look at the fire. You think. What you're about to make has a name. Olla podrida, if you're being descriptive about it. The powerful pot. The pot full of many things, though that name was given by people with more than 2 handfuls of chickpeas to work with. The version they eat at the court. The one mentioned in cookbooks and in plays and in the poems of people who have enough to eat and therefore find food amusing to write about. That version has salt pork and lamb and chicken and cabbage and turnips and blood sausage and chickpeas and whatever else is on hand, and it simmers for the better part of a day and produces something so thick you could almost stand a spoon in it. Philip IV's cooks make this dish. Velasquez's household probably eats it. It is the national dish of a nation that mostly cannot afford it. Your version has chickpeas and an onion. But here is what the cookbooks don't bother to write down, because the people who write cookbooks are not the people who cook from scarcity. The pot is the method, not the recipe. The recipe changes based on what you have. What doesn't change is the approach. Long cooking, hot water from the beginning, not cold. Garlic goes in whole, unskinned. So the papery wrapping keeps the clove together through hours of simmering and releases its flavour slowly. The fat goes in early, so it coats the chickpeas as they soften. The salt goes in late, only after the chickpeas are cooked through, because salting early makes the skin tough and a tough chickpea doesn't fill you properly. The pot goes on the lower hook, not the high one. The fire goes to coals after the initial boil, because coals cook steadily and use the wood slowly. You've been doing this for 11 years. You know this pot. You know the crack. Lower third sealed with wax your mother pressed in 3 years ago. Stable unless you knock it. You know the wire gets hot and you grab it through a cloth. You know the chickpeas need, without soaking, about 2 hours at a steady simmer to become soft enough. And you have enough wood for just about that if you're careful. You fill the pot from the clay water jug on the shelf. The water is cold and slightly stale. This is the water from yesterday's afternoon aguador sitting overnight in the jar. You pour it carefully, not wasting a drop. The chickpeas go in dry. The pot goes on the hook, and now you wait for the boil. The room warms slowly. You can feel it on your hands first, then on your face, the heat from the hearth spreading through the small space. Outside the shutter, the city is beginning to wake up. You can hear it in layers. Someone in the room directly above you. That's old Mateo. the cobbler who rents the space on the second floor, is moving around, his heavy footsteps crossing back and forth. In the courtyard below, the first voices. A woman calling to someone, water being poured, a baby, somewhere in the building starting to cry and then stopping. The Corral de las Flores. 30 families in this building, give or take. 6 stories in the central block, 2 wings wrapping around the courtyard, an archway into the street at the front. In the courtyard there's a well, but the well is silted up, hasn't produced clean water in 10 years, and now it's used mostly to lower food in the summer to keep it cool. The courtyard is where everything happens. Laundry hung between windows, children running, neighbours arguing and trading and watching each other with the specific watchfulness of people who share walls. This building is not unusual for San Millán. Half the south side of Madrid lives like this, in corrales, in shared buildings. 5 or 6 families to a floor, a single outdoor staircase, a courtyard where the women gather and the children play, and the news moves faster than anywhere else in the city. You have known every family in this building since childhood. You know their rhythms. You know who is struggling more than they'll admit, which is almost everyone, and who is doing slightly better than they appear, which is fewer people. The water in the pot is starting to move, small bubbles appearing at the bottom, not a boil yet. 5 minutes more. You use those 5 minutes. You take the onion and cut it. Your knife is old, the blade worn thin from years of sharpening against the stone in the courtyard, but it's still sharp enough. The onion splits and the smell comes up immediately, watering your eyes, and you don't stop or turn away because an onion is not something you waste time resenting. Half goes into the pot as soon as it boils. The other half goes back on the shelf wrapped in cloth. You press 2 garlic cloves, skin on, with the flat of the knife. They go next to the onion on the work surface ready, the lard. You take maybe a third of what's left in the jar, less than you'd like, but today has to be careful, and you put it into a small clay dish near the heat to soften. You check the fire. Good. The coals are settling. The wood is burning cleanly. Smoke going up the chimney mostly, not all of it. Some smoke always escapes into the room, especially on cold mornings when the chimney's cold and the draught is slow to establish itself, and your eyes feel it before anything else. A thin burn at the edges of your vision, familiar, part of the morning the same way the cold floor is part of the morning. The pot starts to boil. You watch it come up, the water beginning to move, small then larger bubbles breaking the surface, and with them the slight foam that forms on top of chickpeas when they first hit hot water. That foam means nothing bad. You skim it off with a wooden spoon, or try to. The spoon is cracked, and has been since September, but it still functions, and drop it in the fire. Onion goes in. Garlic cloves, both of them, unskinned. The smell changes immediately. The sharp, raw smell of the raw onion softens into something sweeter and more complex as the heat hits it. The garlic begins to release its first notes into the water. The pot is on. The family will eat today. You allow yourself one moment of something that isn't quite satisfaction but is adjacent to it. The way you feel when the morning's first problem is managed, when the fire is burning and the pot is on and there's food coming, however simple, however spare. Then you pick up the water jug and check what's left. About a third. The aguador comes at 7, maybe 7:30. You'll need to be in the courtyard for him, or he'll go straight to the next corral. You set the jug back down. The bells of San Millán begin to ring. Prime, 6 o'clock or thereabouts. Time to wake up the house. Your father, Rodrigo, is in the main room. He sleeps on the floor too. He and your mother on a pallet older than yours, the straw inside gone flat as cloth from years of use. Your mother, Inez, has been coughing. She started about 2 weeks ago, a dry cough that comes in the nights and in the cold mornings, and then eases once she's been up for an hour and the air in the room has warmed. You don't say the word that sits at the back of your mind when you hear her cough. You don't say it because saying it might make it real, and because it might also not be that. It might be the smoke or the cold or the bad air from the street, and you're not going to spend the fear before you know whether it's warranted. Your father is already sitting up when you pass the doorway. He's 43 years old. He looks 55. This is not an insult. This is what 43 years of carrying things on the south side of Madrid does to a body. His hands are the biggest thing about him. The knuckles swollen, the palms calloused into a kind of leather, the fingers permanently bent slightly inward from holding ropes and handles and iron rings for 25 years. He can lift things that would break a younger man. He just can't lift them without his back hurting for a day afterward, which is new. New as in it started about 2 years ago and has been getting slowly, steadily worse. Fire's on, you say? He nods. He doesn't say good morning. He's not a man for good mornings. He's a man for nods and for going to work, which is what he does. He stands, his back cracking in 2 separate places, and he moves toward the kitchen without looking at you. Because looking at you would require energy he's saving for the work. Your brother Tomas is in the 3rd room. He's 16, and he got the 3rd room to himself last year, when the previous occupant, a journeyman brickmaker named Cristobal, moved out, and the landlord couldn't fill the room fast enough to stop you from claiming it. You claimed it for Tomas because Tomas is the son, and in this family, the son gets his own space when space is available, and because also Tomas works. He's apprenticed to a blacksmith on the Calle de Toledo, and a boy who works needs his sleep. This is the reasoning. You've never argued with it out loud. Tomas has to be up by 5:30 on work days. Today is a work day. You knock on his door. A sound from inside that could be yes, or could be leave me alone, or could be neither. Just the sound a person makes when they're pulled out of sleep before they're ready. Tomas, up. Another sound. You knock again. Harder. Up. Movement inside. Good enough. You check on your mother. She's awake, lying on her side, eyes open, looking at the dark of the room the way you look at a problem you can't solve yet. She's 41. She moved here at 38 when your father came for work, having spent her whole life in Extremadura before that. And the city, the noise, the smoke, the density of people, the smell, has never quite become normal to her. She manages it. She's a practical woman. But you can see it in her sometimes, in the moments when she doesn't know you're watching, that she misses something she doesn't have a name for. The pot's on, you tell her. Chickpeas, 2 hours maybe. She coughs. A quick, tight cough, like something catching in her chest. Then it clears, and she looks at you. I'll be up in a moment. There's no rush. Stay warm a little longer. She looks at you. She knows what you're doing. She does it too, for you and for Anna and for Tomas. The small permissions you give each other to rest a little more, to not rush into the cold. Go, she says, see if there's bread from the baker. You go. The courtyard of the Corral de las Flores in the early morning is a specific kind of world. 6 o'clock in October, still dark in the lower levels where the sunlight won't reach the courtyard floor for another 2 hours. The cooking smells of 12 families mixing in the air. Olive oil from the first floor family that has slightly more money than everyone else. Something sharp and meaty from the widow on the third floor who always seems to have bones cooking. The neutral damp smell of water being heated, and over everything, wood smoke. You go down the external staircase carefully. The stone steps are wet with condensation, and in October that means slippery. You know which step is uneven, the fourth from the bottom, the right edge crumbled, and you step left by instinct. The archway takes you out to the street, Calle de la Paloma, which is not, in 1650, a charming street name. It's just the street. Cobblestones mostly, though some stretches have given up the cobblestones and are just packed earth now, which in rain becomes mud and in the morning smells of horse. The street is narrow enough that if you stretch your arms out you could almost touch the buildings on both sides. Above you, the upper floors of the buildings lean toward each other, cutting the sky to a strip. The baker is 3 doors down. His name is Pedro, and he's been baking since 3 in the morning, and by 6 o'clock his bread has been out of the oven for 2 hours and is still warm inside but beginning to cool on the outside, the crust softening slightly as the steam trapped inside the loaf starts to work its way out. This timing is intentional, not on Pedro's part. Pedro has been baking the same way for 30 years and doesn't think about it in these terms, but the timing means that by the time the bread reaches a family and is set on the table, it's at exactly the temperature for eating. This is one of those things that works out right without being planned. Pedro also sells yesterday's bread at half price. Yesterday's bread is what you're here for. The line is already 5 women long when you arrive. You know 3 of them. Leonora from the second floor of your corral, who nods at you with the expressionless solidarity of women who've been waiting in the same lines for years. Maria from the building across the street, who is pregnant and looks tired in the specific way of a woman who is pregnant with her 5th child and has come to a private understanding with exhaustion. An older woman you don't know, wrapped in a grey shawl, holding her coins already in her closed fist. You take your place. The smell from the bakery is extraordinary. This is not an exaggeration. This smell of fresh bread in a stone oven is one of those smells that does something to the human body that goes beyond mere appetite. Something older. Something that makes the mouth produce saliva and the stomach clench and the chest expand slightly, as if your body is suddenly more hopeful about the immediate future. The yeast smell and the crust smell, and underneath both of them the deep hot smell of the grain itself, turn to something else by fire. You have 4 maravedis in your pocket. This is what you have for bread this morning. A full fresh loaf is 8. A yesterday's loaf is 4. One yesterday's loaf for 5 people. The women ahead of you are finishing. Leonora takes 2 loaves. Yesterday's she has more to spend, and turns back toward the corral with them tucked under her arm. Maria takes a full loaf, fresh, which you notice and don't comment on. Babies need feeding, and when you're carrying one, you eat what you need. Pedro's boy holds out the tray of yesterday's loaves to you. They're round, dense, the crusts matte, and the colour of dark honey. You pick one up. It's cool on the outside, but when you press gently with your thumb, the crust gives, and you can feel the residual warmth inside. There are 4 left on the tray. You take the largest one. You hand over your 4 maravedis. You hold the loaf on the walk back. It's barely anything in your arms. A loaf of bread for 5 people for breakfast and probably lunch, because dinner is the pot. But there's something about holding it. Something about having solved the first problem of the day. You go back under the archway. In the courtyard, the well sits dead centre, round and dry and useless, A stone ring with no bucket anymore, the bucket having rotted and never been replaced. Children use it as a seat sometimes. You have a memory. You must have been very young, maybe 3 or 4, of actual water being drawn from it. Cold and slightly brown and tasting of minerals, but actual water. Actual free water. Not water you had to pay the aguador for. That well going dry was not a disaster. No one died. The aguador is not expensive. But it was a loss of something that had been free, and nothing that was free becomes paid without leaving a mark. You go upstairs. Your mother is up now, standing at the hearth, stirring the pot. She's wrapped a shawl around her shoulders over her dress, the shawl your grandmother made 30 years ago, and which has been mended in 5 places and will be mended again. She turns when you come in and sees the bread, and something in her face loosens slightly. Just slightly. Just the small easing of a morning problem solved. Any fresh? Yesterday's. It's fine. She takes it from you and sets it on the shelf. You'll tear it at breakfast, all 5 of you, at the table that is not a proper table, but a board set on 2 trestles, eating the bread dry, or if there's anything to dip it in, dipped. There's nothing to dip it in today. Dry bread it is, which is fine, which is not a complaint, which is a meal. Your father is sitting on the stool near the hearth, pulling on his boots. His boots are the best thing he owns. Real leather, bought 2 years ago from a cobbler who owed him a favour and took it out in price. Before that he had alpargatas like you, and alpargatas do not hold up well when your job is carrying things in a market in all weathers. He takes care of these boots. He wipes them in the evenings. He rubs them with a small amount of the lard sometimes to keep the leather supple. The boots will outlast almost everything else he owns. Thomas comes in looking like he wishes he hadn't. 16 and dark-eyed and resentful of mornings in the specific way of adolescent boys throughout all of human history. He is taller than your father now, which happened in the last year, and which your father has not entirely adjusted to. He sits on the second stool. There are 2 stools and a bench, and that's the seating for the whole household, and accepts the piece of bread you tear for him. Anna is last. She appears in the kitchen doorway with her hair still half undone, carrying the comb she's been dragging through it, and she looks at the bread and then at the pot on the hook. What's in the pot? Chickpeas. She makes a face. Don't make that face, your mother says without turning around. Anna makes the face for 1 more second privately, then stops. You eat standing up. You always eat standing up. There is not enough room at the table board for 5 people to sit comfortably, and anyway you're moving in the mornings. You're stirring the pot and checking the fire and planning. Standing and eating is efficient. You tear your piece of bread and eat it in 4 bites, not small bites. You chew it thoroughly. Yesterday's bread has a slightly different texture from fresh. The crumb is drier, a little more compact, the crust harder, but the taste is the same and the satisfaction is the same, and 4 bites of bread is not nothing on an empty stomach. Your father finishes his bread. He stands. He rolls his shoulders. He looks at the pot. Ready by noon? Maybe 10. I put them in early. He nods. He'll be at the Rastro by 7, working until whenever the market closes, which is usually mid-afternoon, then back here. He won't eat until he gets home, unless someone at the market shares something, which occasionally happens. You know he doesn't eat well when he's away, and you know there's nothing you can do about it. I'll try to get bones, he says. This means I'll try to get the butchers to give me bones at the end of the day. He says this probably twice a week. Sometimes he comes back with them. Dark, heavy bones with the marrow still inside, and sometimes a piece of meat still attached to one. Not much, just enough to make the pot smell like a meat pot rather than a legume pot, and that difference is enormous. The smell alone changes what the meal feels like. Be careful, your mother says. She says this every morning. He nods at the doorway and then he's gone, his footsteps heavy down the stone stairs. Tomas finishes his bread and stands. His hands already have the marks of his work on them, small burns on the fingers from sparks, the right palm calloused differently from the left where he grips the hammer. He's learning quickly, the blacksmith says. He has a good instinct for metal. Your mother is proud of this. Your father nods when it's mentioned. You're glad for him. Tomas being good at something, being on a path, being in a workshop with a master who's teaching him a real skill. That's not guaranteed. That was work. That was your father spending 3 months going to every blacksmith in San Millan until he found one who'd take a boy with no money for apprenticeship fees, just the promise of the work. Tomas leaves. Anna leaves to go to the woman on the first floor where she goes sometimes for what passes as schooling. Letters and numbers mostly. The woman is a widow who was educated and needs income and trades lessons for small amounts of money and food. This is your mother's doing, this arrangement. Your mother learned her letters from a nun in Extremadura and believes in letters with a fervour that might surprise people who see only the apartment on the Calle de la Paloma, which leaves you and your mother and the pot. This is most of the day. This is the shape of most days. You and your mother and the kitchen and whatever needs doing. Your mother pulls her stool closest to the hearth and sits. She won't sit still. There's mending in her lap already, a pair of Tomas's work socks worn through at the heel. She threads the needle from memory, her hands doing it while she looks at the pot. It smells good, she says. It's chickpeas and an onion. It doesn't smell good. It smells like something's cooking, which is different, which is still something. The garlic helps, you say. The garlic always helps. This is as close to a domestic conversation as you tend to have in the mornings. It's enough. You know this woman better than anyone in the world. You have spent 19 years in close enough proximity that you understand her from the angle of her shoulders. Right now her shoulders say, tired but managing. Right now her shoulders say, the cough was worse last night and I won't mention it. You won't mention it either. You take the broom, a bundle of dried broom shrub tied to a stick, exactly what the word describes, and there is probably some very old language joke buried in that, and you sweep the kitchen floor. This accomplishes less than it looks like it accomplishes, because the stone is porous and the cracks between stones catch everything, and the broom's bristles are too stiff to reach into the cracks, and you're really just moving the debris from one place to another. But you do it every morning because your mother does it every morning, and her mother probably did it every morning, and because clean-swept floors and clean-swept floors that look clean-swept are not the same as actually clean, but they are what you have. Sweep. Stir the pot. Add more water. It's absorbed more than you expected. Check the fire. Add one stick only. The morning is doing what mornings do. Your neighbour, Señora Alarcón, appears in the doorway at about 7:30. She always does this. Not knocking, because in the corrales you don't knock on open doors. You call, you appear in doorways, you make your presence known. Señora Alarcón is perhaps 60. A widow, lives next door with her 2 adult nephews, both of whom work in the tanneries on the edge of the city. The nephews always smell of the tanneries. Even Señora Alarcón, living in the same rooms, carries a faint edge of it, the sharp, mineral organic smell of leather being cured in urine and bark. The tanneries are where the smell of Madrid's underside comes from, or one of the places. The tanneries are where you send people who have strong stomachs and limited alternatives. Catalina, she looks at the pot. What are you making? Chickpeas. I have some dried rosemary. She holds up a sprig. Dried rosemary from a pot she keeps on her windowsill, the only plant in this entire wing of the building. Take it. You take it. Rosemary in the pot, even dried, changes the character of the broth. It adds a resinous depth to the smell, something Mediterranean and old, something that makes the kitchen smell briefly like somewhere with more light and more space. You drop it in, and the effect is immediate, the steam coming off the pot carrying something new. How's your mother? She's well. Your mother makes a slight sound from where she's sitting. The kind of sound that means she has opinions about being discussed in the third person while present. She's well, Signora Alarcon says, with a specific tone of a woman who doesn't believe this but knows better than to say so. And your father? Working. Signora Alarcon nods at the pot again. You don't have any good fat. I have a small piece of tocino. Tocino. Salt pork. Cured pork fat specifically, the kind that melts into a pot and turns ordinary water into something that coats your mouth and sits in your stomach and carries you through an afternoon. Even a small piece of tocino in the pot today would transform what you're making. I have lard, you say. Lard? She weighs this. How much? Less than I'd like. She goes away and comes back 2 minutes later with a piece of tocino about the size of 2 fingers held together. Salt pork, dried, smelling of smoke and the salt it was cured in. She holds it out to you. For the pot, she says, my nephews have enough. You look at it for a moment. In this building, on this floor, between these families, there is a system of exchange that nobody wrote down and everybody understands. You take the tocino when you need it. You give something back when you have something to give. Signora Alarcon had a fever last spring for a week, and you brought her bread and a cup of warm water with honey every morning. The honey was a gift someone had given your mother, and which she'd been saving for a special occasion, and when Signora Alarcon was sick, that was the special occasion. You don't count. You don't keep ledgers. But you remember, and she remembers, and that's how it works. Thank you, you say. You drop the tocino in the pot. The change in smell is immediate and startling. The fat begins to render into the water, the salt begins to leach out, and the whole pot shifts from smelling like legumes to smelling like something that has meat in it. Not much meat. Not really any meat, just the character of pork, the memory of it, the essence extracted from salt and fat and smoke. But it's enough. It's more than enough. It changes the morning. Your mother looks up from her mending and sniffs. Good, she says. You stir the pot. You are cooking. That's what this is. Not performing poverty for anyone's observation. Not making do with what you have while secretly wishing you had something different. You know what you have. You work with what you have. The calculation you made this morning when you stood at the shelf and counted cloves of garlic and measured lard with your eye and thought about the soaking you forgot, that calculation is the actual skill. That's what 19 years of cooking in this kitchen has given you, not just the physical ability to manage a fire or time a simmer, but the mental habit of thinking in real terms about real quantities and what they can actually do. What you have here, in this pot right now, is better than it was an hour ago. It's better than it was yesterday. Tocino and rosemary and garlic and a fire burning down to coals. This pot is going to produce something by noon that will fill 5 people for the better part of the afternoon. That's not nothing. That's actually, quietly, everything. Your mother coughs again. You stir the pot and you don't say the word. At around 9 o'clock, when the chickpeas have been going for 3 hours and are starting to soften, You know, because you take one out on the spoon and press it between your fingers and feel how much resistance it still has. You decide to go to the market, the Rastro. The decision comes from two things. One, you need a candle. The one you've been using is down to its last finger of wax and will not last through tomorrow night. A candle from the chandler near the Plaza de la Cebada costs 2 maravedis, which is what you have left after the bread. You've been meaning to go for 2 days. 2, and more honestly, you need to be outside. You need to see the city. You've been in 3 rooms for 3 days and the rooms are small and the walls are stone and your mother's cough is in the back of your mind and the pot is on and the fire is manageable and Anna will be home by 10 and can watch the pot. I'm going to the Rastro, you tell your mother. Candle. She doesn't look up from the mending. Be careful near the leather sellers. The smell. I know. And don't... I know, mother. You pull your shawl around your shoulders and go down the stairs. The Calle de la Paloma opens at the bottom of the stairs and you turn south toward the market. October morning, maybe 9 o'clock. The sun up but still low and blocked on this street by the height of the buildings. The cobblestones are damp and you can see your breath. The street is fully alive by this point. The way Madrid is always fully alive by this point, because people here get up early. The city is not a late-rising city. The poor cannot afford to be. Let me tell you about the Rastro. You need to understand what I mean when I say the Rastro, because if I say flea market or second-hand market, you're going to picture something too small and too quiet. The Rastro in 1650 is not a flea market. It is a district, a neighbourhood that has become, over time, so dedicated to the buying and selling of used, second-hand, stolen, recycled, repurposed, and otherwise pre-owned goods that the buying and selling has swallowed the neighbourhood whole and turned it into something that operates like a single organism. It spreads down the hill from the Calle de Embajadores south to the old wall, and the streets within it specialise. There's a street for used clothing, a street for iron work and old tools, a street for furniture in various states of ruin, a street for religious items. This one always makes you slightly nervous, because selling religious items feels like territory that an ordinary person probably shouldn't be in, and a street for food. The food street is where you're going first, because you have an idea. The food sellers in the Rastro are not the same as the Mercado sellers. The Mercado up near the Plaza Mayor has fresh produce, meat, fish, spices, real spices, black pepper in paper cones, saffron in small glass bottles that cost more per gram than anything you'll ever own, cinnamon in sticks that your mother occasionally smells at the spice stall and sets back down. The Rastro food sellers have what the Mercado sellers didn't sell yesterday. Vegetables that are past their prime, bread that didn't sell and is now 2 days old, lemons with soft spots, herbs that are almost dried out, occasional pieces of meat of ambiguous provenance that are selling very cheaply for a reason you probably shouldn't inquire into too deeply. You walk down the hill. The smell of the Rastro begins before you see it. It's not a bad smell exactly. It's a complex smell. The sharp salt and rust smell of old ironwork, the dry, dusty smell of old cloth, the faint rot at the edges of things that aren't quite fresh. Mixed with it, the leather smell from the tanneries that are not far from here, and the general smell of Madrid's south side, which is to say, wood smoke, animal, stone, the century-old organic accumulation of a city that has always been poorer than it looks. You enter through the alley that leads onto the clothing street. The clothing street is always interesting, even when you're not buying anything. The sellers lay their goods out on the cobblestones. coats, dresses, breeches, shirts, shoes in various states, or hang them on lines strung between the buildings. In October, the hanging clothes snap in the cold breeze. Some of them are genuinely salvageable, some are past saving. One woman has a pile of fabric scraps for a cuartillo. You pick through these sometimes for patches, for binding material, for anything with enough body to be useful. And today's pile has some good wool in it, dark green, maybe from a coat that wore out. You pick up the piece. It's about the size of a handkerchief. Good thick weave. You could patch two things with this. A maravedi, the seller says. I don't have a maravedi to spare right now. Come back then. I'll be back. You set it down. You'll come back if it's still there. Sometimes things are still there. Sometimes they're not. You move through to the food street. There are about 15 sellers along this stretch of alley, some with tables, some with baskets on the ground, some with just a cloth spread on the cobblestones with their goods arranged on it. The produce is honest in its lack of ambition. Nobody here is pretending these cabbages are fresh from the garden. These cabbages left someone's garden some days ago. They are sitting here now because someone bought too many, or they were the outer leaves stripped off at the mercado, or they came off a cart that overturned on the way into the city and the ground touch ones sold cheap. You look. A woman with carrots, a bundle of 6, the tips going soft but the body still firm enough. She's asking 1 maravedi for all 6. You pick up the bundle, you flex the carrots gently. 4 of them are salvageable, the other 2 are past it. I'll give you half for these 4. The woman looks at the 4 you've separated out. They're fresh. They're not, and you know it. I'll use them today. A pause? Fine. You don't have the half maravedi. The maravedi is the smallest coin commonly in use, and half of it is theoretical. But you gesture toward the candle shop at the end of the alley and the woman nods. You'll sort it out. This is the market working the way it works here. Nobody has exact change. Nobody has exact amounts of things. You trade what you have for what you can get. 4 carrots. There are dried chilies here. Small ones. The kind that come up from the south. Not the fancy spices, just the common dried red peppers that have been growing in Spain since the last century, when someone brought the seeds back from the New World. A small handful wrapped in paper for half a maravedi. You take them, and then you see the vegetable seller 3 spots down, and you stop. 'Cause he has garlic. Not the garlic from San Millan, not the wrinkled ordinary heads. He has a whole braid of garlic, the proper kind, fat cloved and still papery white, maybe 30 heads tied together by their dry stems. A braid like this comes from outside the city, from the farmlands to the south and east, and when it arrives in Madrid it moves fast. You watch him for a moment. He's selling heads individually, 3 maravedis each, but the braid as a whole for 30, which you do not have. You ask him what he has in scraps, the heads that have lost a clove or 2, the ends of braids, the broken pieces. Every seller in the Rastro has these. They're not displayed. You have to ask. He looks at you. You know what garlic is, he says. This is not insulting. This is a Castilian way of asking whether you know what you're buying, whether you're going to be difficult about quality. I know what garlic is, you say. He reaches under his table and produces a cloth bag. In it 6 broken heads and a handful of loose cloves, some of them slightly dried but none of them rotten. He shakes it slightly. Maybe 100 cloves in there. Maybe more. 2 maravedis. This is what the candle was supposed to buy. I'll be back, you say. You go to the chandler. You explain the situation. He knows you. You've been buying candles from him for 3 years. You trade the 4 carrots and the dried chilies, which he'll sell here or use himself, for 1 candle and the 2 maravedis you need for the garlic. You go back and buy the garlic. You hold the cloth bag in both hands. It's heavier than it looks. 100 cloves of garlic. This is weeks of cooking. This is flavour in every pot between now and Christmas. This is not just garlic. This is the seasoning that makes dried chickpeas into food, that makes yesterday's leftover broth into today's sauce, that makes the bare bones meals of this kitchen into meals with character. You know exactly where you'll put them. The shelf, obviously, but arranged. The broken heads pried apart, the loose cloves in a separate pile, the dried ones set aside to be ground fine against the stone and used as a powder. Nothing wasted. You walk back up the hill toward home, the garlic bag tucked in the crook of your arm. The morning has done its job. The sun is over the buildings now, hitting the upper floors of the Calle de la Paloma, warming the pale stone to something closer to gold. Madrid in the sunlight is a different city from Madrid in the shade, or at least the buildings look different. There's something cleaner about it, something that makes sense of why people came here and stayed here, and built an empire here, in this high, dry place with its thin air and its sharp winters. The light is extraordinary. On a clear October morning, the sky above Madrid is a blue so deep and concentrated it looks almost solid, and the low sunlight makes everything cast long shadows and glow at its edges. You know this city. You've walked it your entire life, and you know it the way you know the cracked clay pot. Every fault, every strength, every particular of how it works and where the problems are. You know which streets flood in heavy rain and which ones stay dry. You know where the aguador fills his cantero every morning, which is the Fuente de la Villa near the Puerta del Sol, 1/2 mile from here, and you know he makes that walk 4 times a day carrying full jars. You know which streets are too narrow for a cart and therefore dangerous for foot traffic, because everyone is pushed to the edges. You know which of the churches has the best singing on Sundays, which one has a priest who preaches too long, which one has the shortest confessions. You know all of this the way you know the chickpeas need longer without soaking, which is to say, in your body, not in your head. You're almost home when you run into Doña Francisca. Doña Francisca is the woman from the first floor of your corral, the one with the olive oil. Her husband is a minor official of some kind, something in the court administration, an escribano or a contador, something involving paper and numbers, and they have slightly more money than the rest of the building, not much more, but enough to be different. Enough to rent 2 rooms instead of 3 people to a room. Enough to have a proper table and chairs. Enough to cook with olive oil. Doña Francisca is perhaps 35. She has very black hair and excellent posture, which is the particular posture of a woman who knows she has slightly more social standing than her neighbours and does not want to be confused with them. She's carrying a basket covered with a cloth, and under the cloth you can see the round shape of a fresh loaf, the kind that costs 8 maravedis, and something that might be a wrapped piece of fish. She sees you. She sees the garlic bag. Good morning, Catalina. Her eyes go to the bag, not with judgment, just assessment. Rastro, garlic, good quality. They had a nice braid from Aranjuez yesterday at the Mercado, probably gone now. I don't go to the Mercado. She knows this. You're not sure why she mentioned it. Sometimes Doña Francisca mentions things you can't afford as though the information itself is a kind of gift. You've decided she means well. It's the easiest interpretation, and the easiest interpretations are often the most useful. Your mother, she says. Is she better? She's well, you say. I heard the cough last night. She says this quietly, not without kindness. Through the ceiling. You don't say anything. There's a woman at the Convento de la Merced who has some knowledge of such things. Herbs, infusions. It might help. We'll see. Doña Francisca looks at you for a moment with the expression of someone who wants to say more and knows better. Then she nods. Good luck with the pot. She walks through the archway. You stand outside for a moment. Through the ceiling. Your mother's cough is going through the ceiling, and Doña Francisca can hear it from one floor down. That's how thin these walls and floors are. That's how close everyone in this building is to everyone else's life, everyone else's noise and smell and trouble and fear. You go upstairs. The pot at 10 o'clock smells like heaven compared to what it smelled like at 6. The tocino is fully rendered, its fat dissolved into the broth, and turned the water a faint golden colour. The garlic, the original 2 cloves, skin on, has swelled and softened to the point where pressing one against the side of the pot with a spoon releases a milky paste. The chickpeas are still slightly resistant to your finger, but getting there. You taste the broth. You hold a spoonful to your lips and sip carefully, letting it sit on your tongue. Salt first. The tocino has salted it, but not aggressively. You add a pinch from the box. Then a back note of garlic, smooth rather than sharp. Then the chickpeas themselves, still with that slightly chalky taste that means they're not done yet, but are getting there. Now the new garlic. You take 3 cloves from your cloth bag. You press them with the flat of the knife. The skin loosens and you peel it off. These are fat, fresh cloves, not the dry, wrinkled ones from before, and the flesh inside is white and dense, releasing its oil against the knife blade. You drop them in the pot whole, skin off this time, because these cloves are going to cook for less than an hour, and they need to be closer to the heat to give what they have. The onion is already half dissolved into the broth. You can see it in threads, golden brown, moving when you stir. You add the remaining half onion now, cut in 4 pieces. Anna comes home at 10:15, as expected. She sits on the stool and watches you work. This is how she learned to cook. How you learned. How your mother learned. Watching the person at the hearth. Absorbing it without being formally taught. Until one day the knowledge is inside you, and you couldn't tell anyone how it got there. What's in it? Anna asks. Chickpeas, tocino from Signora Alarcon, garlic, fresh from the Rastro, onion, rosemary. Rosemary, Anna repeats, as though this is notable, from Signora Alarcon's windowsill. She has a whole pot of it. She does. Anna is quiet for a moment. The fire pops. Outside, the courtyard sounds are getting louder as the morning progresses. More voices, a child crying, someone dragging something heavy across the stone below. Catalina, Anna says. What? There's a girl at Signora Carpio's who has a mother with the same cough as Mama. She said the curandera from the Calle de Toledo made her a tea with... We don't have money for a curandera. She said it wasn't expensive, just... Anna, your sister stops. You stir the pot. I'll talk to Papa tonight, you say, which means I've already thought about this. I'm already thinking about this. I haven't stopped thinking about it. But I'm not going to discuss it right now because there's nothing to decide until there's money to decide with, and there's no money until tonight. Anna nods. She picks up the mending your mother left and looks at it without starting it. The pot goes on. Your mother comes in at around 11. She moves slowly in the morning, slower than she used to. Though you don't say this, you just notice it. She looks at the pot and lifts the lid and sniffs. Her face changes. Not dramatically. Your mother doesn't do drama. But there is a specific expression she gets when the food smells right, when the kitchen is working properly, when the problems of the morning have been managed and something good is in the making. It's a slight opening, a slight relaxation around the eyes. It's the expression of a woman who came from a dry village in Extremadura to a cramped apartment in a crowded city and made it into a home somehow, through decades of these same small acts. She picks up a spoon and tastes. Good fat, she says. Senora Alarcón had tocino. I'll make her something, meaning she'll find a way to reciprocate. Did you get garlic? You hold up the cloth bag. She opens it, looks inside, nods with approval she won't say out loud. Put the new ones in late. After the chickpeas are done, they'll stay sharper. You were already planning to do this. You don't say so. She's teaching you. You let her teach you. This is a different kind of exchange from the tocino and the bread. An older one, a more fundamental one. The one that doesn't end until one of you does. There's rosemary, you say. I can smell it. She lowers herself onto the stool and picks up the mending, and you stand at the hearth with the spoon, and you cook together in the way you've been cooking together for 11 years, without talking much, the conversation entirely in the sounds of the pot and the fire and the occasional instruction and the occasional agreement. This is the kitchen. This is what goes on in it. I want to stop here for a moment. I want to explain something. You've been listening, or maybe you've been half listening. Maybe you're already somewhere between awake and asleep, that good place. And I've been describing chickpeas and onions and garlic and a cracked clay pot. And maybe that sounds very ordinary. Maybe it sounds like there's nothing here but a poor family managing their cooking. But here's the thing I need you to understand about what you've just been living through in this kitchen in Madrid in 1650. Every single decision made this morning, which wood to use and how much, whether to add the lard early or late, where to buy the garlic, how to negotiate for the carrots, where to find the tocino. Every one of these decisions is a decision made under real constraint, with real consequences, by a 19-year-old woman who is doing this with 11 years of practice and the specific accumulated knowledge of her mother and her mother before her. This is not improvisation. This is not poverty making do with less. This is a skill of a very particular and very demanding kind. The skill of making real food from minimal ingredients, with perfect timing, without waste, for people who need to be fed. And this skill is invisible. This is the part that matters. The people at the top of this empire, the ones in the Alcazar, the ones in the palace, the merchants and the court officials and the hidalgos with their coats of arms, they eat well because someone has this skill. Because in every kitchen, in every household and every corral in Madrid, someone is doing exactly what Catalina is doing this morning, making the decision about where the money goes, managing the fire, timing the pot, making something from very little that sustains the people who go out into the city and carry things and make things and file papers and cast metal. The empire runs on chickpeas. The empire runs on the cracked clay pot. The empire runs on the knowledge in Catalina's hands, and nobody knows her name. You've probably heard this observation made about servants and slaves and workers throughout history in various forms, that the people who do the essential work are invisible, that the history books talk about kings and generals. What's different about a kitchen is that the invisibility is built into the design. A kitchen is supposed to be invisible. A kitchen is the room at the back of the house that produces results without being seen producing them. The olla arrives on the table and it smells of tocino and garlic and something deep and nourishing, and nobody at the table says, Imagine the skill required to produce this from 2 handfuls of chickpeas. Nobody says, Catalina managed the fire and negotiated at the Rastro and used Senora Alarcon's rosemary at exactly the right time, and thought about the soaking she forgot and compensated for it. They eat. They go back to work. The pot needs washing. The fire needs managing. Tomorrow starts the same way. At noon, the pot is done. You know it's done not by timing, but by the chickpeas themselves. You take one out on the spoon and it's changed. No longer chalky in the centre, no longer resistant. It yields completely under your finger, soft through and through, and when you taste it, it tastes of itself and of the broth it's been sitting in, the garlic and the pork fat and the rosemary all inside it now. You add the salt. A full pinch, more than in the morning, the chickpeas ready to take it now. You stir once, clockwise. You taste again. There. You lower the hook so the pot sits further from the heat. The chickpeas need to rest before you serve them, to absorb the last of the cooking liquid rather than sit in excess broth. This is a thing your mother taught you. Resting the pot, letting it come down slowly, settle into itself. Your father comes home at around 1 o'clock. He's carrying 3 bones, large ones, leg bones from cattle or horse. You'll know which, when they're in the pot. Cattle bones have a different smell, with the marrow intact and some connective tissue still attached near the joint ends. He sets them on the work surface and you look at them, and then at him. He doesn't say anything. He sits down heavily on the stool. Good bones, you say. Market closed early. The butcher had to clear out. He means the butcher gave these away or sold them for nearly nothing at the end of the market day, and your father was there to take them. This is part of how your father supplements what he earns carrying things, being present at the moments when things are given or sold cheap. You put the bones aside. They won't go in today's pot. Today's pot is already made, tomorrow's pot. You'll crack them tonight and put them in cold water to soak overnight, drawing out the blood and the surface fat. And tomorrow morning you'll start a new pot with the bones first, then the chickpeas when there are any, then whatever else presents itself. The marrow will render into the water and turn it golden and thick, and the broth from these bones will taste of something specific and substantial, not just the watery depth of fat and smoke. Your father washes his hands with water from the jug carefully. The water is limited, you don't use it frivolously, and dries them on the cloth near the hearth. He looks at the pot. Chickpeas. Tocino from Senora Alarcon. Fresh garlic. He nods. He takes his bowl. Wooden. Old. Carved by your mother's father. One of the 3 things that came with her from Extremadura. And he holds it out and you ladle from the pot. You give him more than half of what you'll give yourself. This is not a thought. This is just how you do it. He works harder physically than you do and needs more. This is factual. You call Anna and your mother serves herself. Anna takes her bowl without being asked, which is an improvement. 2 months ago, you had to remind her every time to dish her own food. You take less than everyone else. This is also not a thought. You eat standing near the hearth, because the food is better when it's hot, and the pot is at the hearth. And standing near the pot means you can have more if there's more to have. There is a little more. The pot's about 2/3 full after the first round of bowls. You'll eat the rest in the evening when Tomas comes home. The food is good. Not good in the way that expensive food is good. Not complex or rich or carefully constructed. Good in the way that food that fills an empty body is good. The chickpeas soft and substantial. The broth deep with pork and garlic. The rosemary at the back of it all like a note that resolves a chord. Good because it took all morning to become this. Good because you manage the fire and the timing and the negotiation at the Rastro and the arrangement with Signora Alacon. Your father eats without speaking. When he finishes his bowl, he sits for a moment and then says, "There's a pig being killed on Friday, Fonseca's pig. He asked if we want to buy into it." Fonseca is a man in the corral who keeps a pig in a room on the ground floor, which is illegal and which everyone knows about and nobody reports, because the pig will eventually become meat, and meat is shared. Once or twice a year, a family in a corral like this one will kill their pig and sell shares to the other families. A leg, a shoulder, the offal, the blood for morsilla. You pay for your share in advance and you get it on killing day, and the share is sized to what you paid and what's available. Your mother looks at your father. What's the price? 12 maravedis for a share of the blood and the offal, 30 for a leg, 12 for blood and offal. That means morsilla, blood sausage, and menudo, the stomach and intestines, which you'd cook in a stew. Neither is glamorous, both are substantial. Blood sausage lasts, dried, for weeks. A pot of menudo is a meal that sits in you. Blood and offal, your father says. He's not asking, he already knows the answer. He's just saying it out loud so everyone in the room can agree. Yes, your mother says. Yes, you say. 12 maravedis. Where 12 maravedis are going to come from in the next 2 days is a calculation that begins immediately in your head. Your father gets paid Friday, a variable amount depending on how much he worked, but usually somewhere between 80 and 120 maravedis a week. 12 out of that is possible. More than possible. Not comfortable, but possible. But there is also the rent. And the candles. You used the candle money for the garlic this morning, which was the right choice. But it means the candle is still a problem. And the aguador, twice a day, 1 maravedi each time, 7 a week just for water. And bread every day. You're doing this calculation the way you always do it. Not anxiously. The anxiety comes when you've exhausted all the calculations and there's still a gap and you haven't exhausted them yet. There are still options. There's still manoeuvring room. You're going to work for Doña Pilar on Thursday, the merchant's wife on the Calle Maya, who occasionally hires you to help with cleaning, and that pays 8 maravedis. There's the possibility of other work. There's the possibility that your father brings home more bones or more scraps. There are conversations to have and adjustments to make. You're not at the gap yet. You might not reach the gap. You stir the remaining pot. Thursday, you work for Doña Pilar from 7 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Doña Pilar's house is on the other side of the city from San Millán, up in the neighbourhood near the Calle Maya where the buildings are wider and taller, and the streets are sometimes wide enough that 2 carts can pass each other. This is a different Madrid from the one you live in, not unrecognisable. It's still the same stone, still the same sky, still the same smells if you pay attention, but different in its ease. The houses here have glass in all the windows, not just the upper floor ones. The doors are solid and carved. The shop fronts have proper signs. The streets have been paved more recently and the paving stones are level. Doña Pilar's house has a kitchen that is large enough to walk around in. You know this because you've worked here 7 times in the past year. You stand in that kitchen every time for a moment when you first arrive, and you look at it the way you looked at the Rastro from the top of the hill when you were small, with a specific feeling of someone seeing what a thing could be if circumstance were different. This kitchen has a proper table, a real one, heavy oak, scarred with use but solid. There are 2 hearths, not one, and they're built higher and wider than yours, with a proper iron crane on the larger one for hanging the pot at different heights. There's a bread oven built into the wall beside the larger hearth, not a baking dish, an actual bread oven, with an iron door and a stone floor. The kind you can produce 12 loaves at once in if you've soaked and risen and kneaded enough dough. There's a storage room off the kitchen. You've been in it. Sacks of flour, casks of olive oil, a whole hanging salted leg of pork, bundles of dried herbs in amounts you would need months to use at home, salt in a ceramic pot the size of your kitchen shelf. A whole leg of pork, hanging from the ceiling. You look at it every time. You don't touch it. You're not there to touch it. But the presence of it, the fact that it exists, that someone bought an entire leg and has been eating from it for what looks like weeks, tells you everything about the distance between that kitchen and yours. What you do for Doña Pilar is cleaning. Floors first, then the hearths, removing old ash, cleaning the grates, then the storage room, sweeping, reorganizing what's shifted out of place. She doesn't ask you to cook. She has a maid for that. You're the woman who comes when the cleaning needs doing on a larger scale than one person can manage. Doña Pilar herself is absent for most of the morning. She appears briefly at 9 to tell you to be careful with the larder. Careful meaning, don't take anything. This is said to you the way it was said the first time, the same tone, which means either she doesn't remember having said it before, or she says it on principle every time regardless. You don't say, I've worked here 7 times and have never taken anything. You say, yes, Doña Pilar. You keep sweeping. The maid's name is Esperanza. She's younger than you, maybe 16, from somewhere in the south. She's been here 2 years and treats the kitchen with a specific combination of authority and exhaustion, of someone who lives in a place she does not own, and is responsible for keeping it functioning. You and Esperanza understand each other without needing to explain it. You work side by side on the hearthstones and you talk occasionally, but you don't talk about your own kitchens because there's no point in making the comparison out loud when you both already feel it. At noon, Esperanza makes herself and you a bowl of something from the pot that's been going since morning. It's a meat broth, real broth, from actual meat, bone-in chicken and a piece of ham, with bread torn into it and some kind of leafy vegetable you don't see often, maybe chard, maybe escarole. You eat it standing at the big oak table and it tastes of everything you don't have at home. The depth, the richness, the way the fat from the chicken has made the surface of the broth slightly iridescent. The bread has absorbed the broth and become something halfway between bread and dumpling, soft through and through. You eat it slowly, you eat it attentively. This is not greed. This is the practice of eating carefully when you have access to something you don't usually have, the way a thirsty person drinks at a fountain, not wastefully, but with full appreciation. Good, you say. Esperanza shrugs. It's just chicken. It's not just chicken. It's just chicken the way a clear sky is just weather. At 2 o'clock, Doña Pilar counts out 8 maravedis into your palm. You close your fingers around them. Walking home, your cloak pulled tight against the October cold. The afternoon has gotten sharper, the sky to the north showing the grey edge of coming clouds. You calculate again. 8 from Pilar. Father pays Friday, estimate 100, 12 for the pig share. Rent on the 16th, 40 maravedis. Bread every day until then, roughly 20 more. Candles, 2, aguador, continuing daily cost. Wood, urgent, need more by tomorrow. You stop at the leñatero's cart on the way through San Milan. You buy 2 bundles of proper firewood, not sticks, real split logs, for 6 maravedis. The leñatero wraps them with cord and you carry them under your arm, the rough bark against your shawl, heavy and solid. Enough wood for 4 or 5 days of careful cooking. The relief of having the wood is physical. It goes through your chest and your shoulders and the set of your jaw. You go home. The bones are in a pot of cold water on the shelf, soaking since last night. The water is pink-grey with what's come out of them. Blood and marrow impurities, surface proteins. Tomorrow morning you'll dump this water, rinse the bones and start fresh. The actual broth comes in the second water, clean. Your mother is at the table when you come in, writing a letter. This is something she does perhaps once a month. Writing to her sister in Extremadura, using paper your father buys in a single sheet from the paper seller near the church. Writing small and tightly to use both sides and the margins. You've never been to Extremadura. Your memories of it are the memories of a 4-year-old. Heat, dust, a house with a lower ceiling than this. Your mother's sister is a stranger to you with a familiar name. Your mother writes slowly. She was taught letters in childhood. Better than most women of her circumstances, better than many men, and she writes in a careful, slightly formal hand that doesn't look like the way she speaks. When she reads the letters back to you, the written version of herself is more formal than the person sitting next to you. You've noticed this. You haven't asked about it. She looks up. Good day? Pilar paid well. I got wood. She looks at the wood under your arm, and something in her face does the same thing it does when the pot smells right. Good, she says. She goes back to the letter. You unload the wood next to the hearth, stacking it against the wall. The smell of the wood, oak, you think, or something like it, with the slightly sharp, dry smell of recently cut wood, fills the room for a moment and then fades. You add one log to the fire, which has been going on cold since this morning and is still alive but hungry. The fire takes the log and grows. You take your 8 maravedis and put them in the small ceramic pot on the shelf where the household money lives. You don't count what's in there. You know what's in there. Counting it again wouldn't change the amount. You wash your face over the basin with cold water. The skin of your hands is dry in October, dry and cracked at the knuckles, the skin around the nail bed splitting slightly, and you rub a little of the lard on them before washing, which softens the cracks without fixing them. Your hands are the same as your mother's hands. This is not a metaphor. The cracks in the same places, the callus on the right palm from the broom handle and the pot handle and the grater. The nails kept short, because short nails don't catch on the work. You look at your hands for a moment. Then you dry them. The pot for dinner needs starting. The bones aren't ready yet. Those are for tomorrow. Tonight is the rest of the chickpeas from yesterday's pot, reheated with the garlic and fat still in them. Reheated food is not a concession. Reheated food is often better than the original. The flavours have had more time to integrate. The chickpeas have fully absorbed the broth. The garlic has become something milder and sweeter. You'll add water, heat it through, add whatever else presents itself. Whatever else presents itself tonight is 2 dried chilies from the cloth in your pocket which you forgot you had until just now. These are the ones you didn't trade to the chandler, the ones you kept. Dried red chilies. You crack them over the pot and the seeds fall in along with the broken pieces of dry red skin. The smell when they hit the hot water is immediate, bright, sharp. The slight capsicum burn that opens the back of the throat and wakes up the whole pot. You cover the pot and let it reheat slowly. Outside, the bells of San Milan ring for Vespers, 5 o'clock. Tomas will be home within the hour. The evening can start. There's something I want you to understand about what life in a 1650 Madrid slum kitchen means, and this is going to sound strange at first. It means you know where your food comes from in a way that people who have more rarely do. Let me explain that. In Doña Pilar's kitchen, with the whole leg of pork hanging from the ceiling, that leg is a purchased object. Someone, a servant probably, or Esperanza, went to the mercado and selected it and paid for it and carried it home. The connection between Doña Pilar eating her evening meal and the pig that produced the leg is long. A butcher, a market, a servant, a purchase, a kitchen. Several transactions, several people, several distances. In your kitchen, in the Corral de las Flores, you know exactly where the tocino came from because you watched Senora Alarcón go to her cabinet and take it out. You know where the garlic came from because you held it in your hands at the Rastro and felt its weight and smelled it and decided it was worth the candle money. You know where the chickpeas came from because you bought them from Senora Murillo in the courtyard below, who buys them by the sack from a carter who comes from outside the city. Everything in your kitchen has a person attached to it. The dried rosemary has Senora Alarcón's face attached to it. The bones have your father's cracked hands attached to them. The salt has the box that's been on the shelf since before you can remember attached to it. The box your mother brought from Extremadura. The box that was her mother's before that. This sounds like a small thing. It isn't. It means you waste less. Because you know what things cost in human effort, not just in coins. It means you are accurate about what you have and what you don't have, because the knowledge is physical rather than abstract. It means you cook with attention that is different from attention that comes from preference or artistry. It comes from necessity, which is a sharper kind of attention. You can't afford not to pay attention. The pot can't be wrong. There are 5 people depending on the pot, and this specific form of knowledge, the poverty-born accuracy, is going to vanish from most of the Western world within a few generations of where you're standing right now. The distances will get longer, the transactions more numerous. The connection between the person cooking and the origin of what they're cooking will become theoretical rather than personal. And with that distance will go a kind of skill, an entire vocabulary of improvisation and management and precise small decision-making. That doesn't transfer to books well, because it was never in books. It was in hands, in mornings, in the particular experience of standing at a cold hearth with a cloth bag of chickpeas and working out what you're going to do. You're doing that right now. You're doing it right now, and no one is going to write it down. Friday arrives with rain. You hear it before you open your eyes. Rain on the tiles above the attic and rain on the shutters, and the particular hollow drum of rain in the cold courtyard below. October. Rain in Madrid is not gentle. It comes sideways when there's wind, which there is this morning, and it hits the stone and the wood and the tile with enough force to wake you up through a closed shutter. Your first thought is, the fire. Wet weather means cold hearth. Cold hearth means the fire takes more to start. Fire takes more to start means wood. Your second thought is, Friday. Father gets paid today. Your third thought is, the pig. The pig is being killed today. In the corrals, pig killing has a specific social quality. It's not quite a celebration. It's more than that and also less than that. It's an event that the whole building knows about and participates in at the edges. Fonseca's pig has been fattening in the ground floor room all year. It has eaten the kitchen scraps of the building. For some of the families, including yours, what you gave the pig was directly connected to what you got from the pig when it died. Kitchen scraps in October. A share of blood and offal in October. A rough accounting that nobody maintained formally. The pig will be killed in the courtyard by the man Fonseca has arranged to do it, probably around mid-morning once everyone who's paid for a share is present or has sent someone to represent them. You'll go down for it. Not for the killing itself necessarily, but for what comes after, the dividing. But first, the morning. Fire, pot, chickpeas. The bones are ready. You changed their soaking water last night before bed, and again this morning. The second change is nearly clear, just barely tinged with pink, which means the bones have given up most of what you don't want and are ready to give up what you do want. You put them in the pot with fresh water. Cold water, not hot. Starting with cold water is how you make broth, not soup. The difference is real and specific. Cold water draws the soluble proteins out of the bones slowly as the temperature rises, and these proteins are what make broth thick and sustaining. Hot water seizes the surface and you get less of it. Cold water, bones in, pot on the hook. You blow the fire back to life from last night's coals. There are coals. You built the fire high before bed, knowing you'd need them this morning. Another of those forward-thinking habits that live in you without your having to decide on them. While the pot comes up to temperature, you think about what's happening today in the city. Let me tell you about Madrid in 1650 and what October means here, because you need to feel the scale of this place to understand why a family in a corral in San Millán matters to the city at all. Madrid in 1650 has roughly 80 to 100,000 people. That number was higher 20 years ago. The 1630s saw a plague. The plague of 1647 killed tens of thousands, not just in Castile but across the Mediterranean, and Madrid's population has been reduced and is recovering. But 100,000 people is still an enormous number for a city that had maybe 30,000 people a century before, and that sits in the middle of a plateau without a navigable river, without easy access to trade routes, without the natural geographic logic of a place like Barcelona or Seville. Madrid is where it is because of Philip II. He decided in 1561 to move the court here, to the centre of the peninsula, away from the coastal cities that might be pressured from the sea. And when the court moved, the city grew, not because of commerce or trade, not because of a port or a river, but because power was here and power attracts. The merchants came because the nobles came. The artisans came because the merchants came. The labourers and servants and the poor came because everyone else came and the work was here, and this was where you could survive, even at the bottom. The bottom is where your family lives, not the worst bottom. Below you are beggars, the genuinely destitute, the ones who sleep in doorways or in the portals of churches, who eat what they can beg or find or steal. Below them are the ones who don't survive the winter. Madrid has a lot of those. October is when you start to know who's going to make it to April. You're going to make it to April. Your father has work, and Thomas has work, and you have occasional work, and the calculations are difficult but not impossible. You're not comfortable, but you're not the ones who sleep in doorways. The pot begins to move. The first sign from the bone pot is the smell. It's different from the chickpea smell, different from the tocino smell. It's a deeper smell, more animal, the smell of collagen and marrow beginning to liquefy in hot water. If you've ever walked past a butcher shop where they're making stock in the back, you know this smell. It's not a delicate smell. It's not the kind of smell that makes you think of a fine dining room. It's a foundational smell, a subsistent smell, the smell of getting through. You skim the surface as the water heats. What comes up first is grey foam, proteins and blood coagulating, and you spoon it off carefully into the fire. After 3 or 4 rounds of skimming, the surface clears, and the broth starts to look like broth. Pale gold, faintly moving, entirely opaque with what's dissolved in it. This is the base. Everything built on top of this is the meal. You're adding the chickpeas later, new ones from Signora Murillo, bought yesterday afternoon before the rain started, And what you're making today will be the best pot of the week. The bones made the foundation. The chickpeas are the substance. If the pig share today includes what you're hoping it includes, tonight's supper will be something your family hasn't had in weeks. Your mother is coughing this morning. You can hear it through the wall, that tight catch, then the full cough, then quiet. Twice. 3 times. Worse in the morning, always worse in the morning. And you stand at the hearth and you stir the pot and you don't say the word and you think about the 12 maravedis for the pig and the 8 from Pilar and what else can be moved around in this month's accounting to find a little for the woman at the Convento de la Merced that Doña Francisca mentioned. Not the word, just the solution to it. Ana appears in the doorway. Her face asks, "Is Mama all right?" "She's fine. Go get dressed." Your sister looks at you for a moment. She is 12 and she knows something is wrong and she knows you won't tell her yet. And then she goes. Mid-morning, the pig is killed. You're in the courtyard when it happens. Everyone is. You don't look directly. Not because you're squeamish. You've seen animals slaughtered before. You help with chickens more than once. But because there's a specific quality to the sound of a pig in its final moment that goes through you, even when you're prepared for it. A sound that seems larger than the animal producing it. Then silence. Then the work begins. The whole courtyard becomes organized around the pig in a way that you've seen before, but that never fails to impress you for its efficiency. Fonseca is directing, pointing to the men who'll handle the carcass, the women who've come with their bowls for the blood. The blood goes first, captured in a large clay bowl, thick and dark red and still steaming in the cold air, because blood is what goes bad fastest and has to be dealt with immediately. The women who paid for blood shares are already moving toward it, measuring with the wooden cups Fonseca has provided. You're there with your bowl. The blood is poured in. Your measured share, roughly a quarter of the total. Warm and dense and smelling of iron and something more organic. You put your cloth over the top immediately to keep heat in and dust out. Your job now is to get this inside and cooled and started on the morcilla before it sets in a way you can't work with. Morcilla, blood sausage. In this region, in this era, morcilla de Madrid is made with the blood and with onion, a lot of onion, and with rice if you have it, and with whatever spice you can afford. You have no rice today. You have onions, 3 of them, and the dried chilies, and some of the new garlic and the blood and the casings, pork intestines which you'll be getting in the offal share once the carcass is divided, and salt. You go upstairs. Your mother meets you in the kitchen. She looks at the bowl and nods. Without speaking, she goes to the shelf and gets the 3 onions and begins peeling them. You set the blood bowl near the fire to keep it from cooling too fast. You check the bone pot, still going, good, and you think about the order of operations. This is a coordination problem. You have a bone broth that needs another 2 hours. You have blood that needs to be processed in the next 4 hours, or it'll set too firm to work with. You have the offal coming in another hour, probably, once Fonseca's done dividing. The offal needs its own pot and its own preparation. You have 1 hearth, 1 pot hook, 1 fire. You manage. You always manage. The bone pot goes on the low hook, slow simmer. The blood pot goes next to the fire, but not on the hook. It needs to stay warm but not cook yet. Not until the onions are ready and the casings arrive. The onions your mother is already cutting, fine, thin, into a clay dish that goes on the flat stone before the fire so the onions can soften slowly without the full heat of the flame. The blood sausage will be made on the floor of the hearth, in the flat pan once everything is ready. It won't be stuffed into casings. Not today. You don't have time and the casings need washing and soaking. So it'll be what some people call morcilla de sartène, pan blood sausage, made in the pan and eaten the same day, not preserved. You're making it to eat tonight and to give to Senora Alarcon in partial return for the tocino. When the offal arrives, half of what Fonseca has from the stomach and intestines, you look at it for a moment. You've worked with offal before. You know what to do with it. But there's a particular stage of the process where you have to decide not to think about the origin too closely and just focus on the technique. And you reach that stage and you pass through it and you start cleaning the intestines with cold water from the jug while your mother keeps cutting onions. Both of you silent, efficient. The kitchen organised the way a kitchen with one hearth has to be organised when there's suddenly a lot of work to do. By noon, the bone broth is done. You pour it through the cloth strainer into the second clay pot, saving every drop, the cloth squeezing out the last golden brown liquid, and put the bones aside. They'll be cracked later for the marrow, which you'll eat on bread. The chickpeas go into the saved broth, which is already hot. The blood sausage preparation is ready. You add the softened onions to the blood, the salt, the crushed dried chiles, 3 crushed garlic cloves. You stir with a wooden spoon until the onions are fully incorporated. You heat the flat pan on the open stones before the fire. The blood mixture goes in. Thick, glossy, smelling of iron and onion and spice. It cooks from the outside in, the edges setting first while the centre is still liquid, and you keep moving it, keep folding the set edges toward the centre, and the smell in the kitchen is rich and meaty and specific, the kind of smell that's been in this room for every generation that's cooked in it. Your mother is standing at your shoulder. A little more salt, she says. You add a little more salt. And the chili. I thought the chili was enough. For you. Your father likes it sharper. You add a pinch more dried chili. She says nothing else. She watches for a moment more and then goes back to the stool. Thomas comes home at 1:30 with the particular smell of the forge on him. Coal smoke and metal, and the specific heat smell of a body that has spent hours near extreme temperatures. He looks at the kitchen and then at you. Blood sausage. Tonight. He sits down with an expression that is as close to happiness as Thomas gets at 16, which is to say, the tightness around his eyes has eased somewhat. And the broth? Chickpeas in bone broth. The bones Papa brought. He doesn't say anything else. He picks up the piece of bread you give him, part of today's loaf, which you bought at full price this morning because this is a day for the full price, and he eats it standing at the counter. Your father comes home at 3 with coin, 90 maravedis, slightly less than usual because the rain slowed the market, and you take the 12 for the pig share from it immediately, because you told Fonseca you'd pay today, and you don't want to owe money overnight when it doesn't have to be owed. You take the 12 maravedis downstairs. Fonseca is still in the courtyard with 2 other men from the building, the work of dividing and cleaning mostly done. The courtyard smelling strongly of what pigs are made of, which is substantial. He takes your 12 maravedis with the nod of a man who expected you. Good blood, he asks. Very good. Thank you. Rub of salt next time, he says, meaning the intestine should be rubbed with salt before washing to help clean them. This is advice you already know, but you accept it, because Fonseca is a man in his 50s who has killed perhaps 30 pigs, and his advice is always worth taking regardless of whether you already know what he's saying. I'll remember, you say. You go back upstairs. The evening of a day when the pig was killed in the corral is a different evening from the usual. The whole building smells of it. Every family who bought a share is cooking something, and all those smells rise together through the air shaft of the courtyard and through the shared walls. Blood and onion and pork, fat and spice. 20 variations on the same theme, each slightly different based on what each family has and what each woman knows to do with it. It's an involuntary sharing. The cooking smells, a kind of collective conversation that nobody arranged. Your kitchen smells better than usual, better than it has smelled in weeks. The chickpeas are done at 4, done the way they should be, soft through and through, having absorbed the bone broth all afternoon, swollen and golden with fat and collagen, and all the time the bones spent in the water. You add the last of the garlic, the fresh cloves, with 10 minutes to go, and they cook just enough to take the raw edge off without losing their character. The blood sausage is done. You've cut it into pieces in the pan and let it cool slightly. It needs to be held together, needs to have set enough that it doesn't fall apart when you lift it. There is marrow, cracked from the bones with the handle of the knife, the thick cream of it scooped out with a spoon and put on a piece of bread that you saved from morning specifically for this purpose. Your father gets this piece of bread. He takes it without speaking and eats it standing at the hearth, and he makes no expression because he is a man who does not make expressions. But the marrow disappears quickly, and then the bread that had the marrow on it disappears, and then he sets the bread down. You serve supper at 5:30 when the bells ring for vespers. All 5 of you at the table board. The chickpeas in their bone broth, thick and deep. The blood sausage on the clay dish, cut into rounds. Bread from today's loaf, not stale. The last of yesterday's wine, which your father had bought on Tuesday, a small amount, enough for 1 cup each. This is the table. This is the best meal of the week. Your mother eats slowly, which she always does. She eats in small movements, deliberate, never rushing. Your father eats with his bread in his left hand and his spoon in his right, and doesn't put the bread down between bites. Anna eats quickly, which she always does, and then looks at the pot with the expression of someone calculating whether there is more. There is more. You'll give it to her. She needs it. Tomas eats the blood sausage first, then the chickpeas, then soaks the last of his bread in the broth and doesn't waste a drop of it. You eat last after you've served everyone. Your bowl is full. You give yourself a real portion tonight, not the smaller portion of most mornings. Tonight there is enough, and you let yourself eat enough. The broth. You put your spoon in and lift it to your lips, and it has everything you put into it. The collagen depth of the bones, the garlic, the rosemary from 3 days ago still there. Faint, a ghost of itself. The chickpeas giving their particular starchiness to the liquid. It tastes of the week. It tastes of the Rastro on Wednesday morning. The cold handles of the food seller's tables under your fingers, the cloth bag of garlic in the crook of your arm walking home up the hill. It tastes of Senora Alarcon's generosity and your father's 3 bones and the fire you built at 6 this morning in a cold kitchen. It tastes right. Your mother looks at you across the table. Not long. Just for a moment. The expression on her face is not gratitude exactly. You don't require gratitude from each other. That's not how this works. But it is acknowledgement. It says, I see what you did today. I know what it took. You did it right. You nod. You eat your supper. Later. After the clearing up, the pot washed, the fire banked for the night. The remains put away for tomorrow, what's left of the blood sausage wrapped in cloth for Senora Alarcon. You sit by the shuttered window in the kitchen. Your mother has gone to bed. Anna has gone to bed. Tomaz has gone to bed. Your father is still at the table in the main room, looking at the coins, doing the calculation you've already done, arriving at the same conclusion. Short, but manageable. Tight, but not desperate. Not this month. You sit by the window. You're tired in a particular way that isn't just physical. Your hands ache, the right hand especially, where the cracked skin on the knuckle has been irritated by the hot water and the cleaning, a specific sharp pain when you close the fist. Your feet are cold because you haven't worn your alpargatas since this morning when you went down to pay Fonseca. Your back is tight from bending over the hearth. Your eyes are heavy with the smoke and the firelight and the long day. This is the tiredness of a day that went well. It went well in small increments, the way days do when they go well here. Not one big success, 100 small ones. The fire caught on the 4th try. The garlic was there at the Rastro. The carrots were usable. The tocino came from next door. The bones your father brought. The pig Fonseca raised all year. The blood that you processed correctly. The broth that went the full distance from grey to gold. 100 small victories. You open the shutter a crack, not wide. The cold air comes in, but a crack, enough to see the courtyard. The courtyard at night. It's dark. The moon is up but not bright tonight behind thin clouds, enough to see the shapes of the building around you, the dark squares of shuttered windows, the lines of laundry that nobody took in before the rain, and which are now thoroughly wet and will need wringing in the morning, the stone ring of the dead well. There's a light in one window across the courtyard. The widow on the 3rd floor, probably she keeps late hours. You can see the orange edge of her candle behind the shutter. The city sounds are different at night. Not absent. Madrid doesn't go absent, but different. The commerce sounds are gone. The vendors, the carts, the market noise. What's left is human. Voices from the taverns a few streets over. Someone laughing somewhere in the building. A dog, distant bells. The layer of industry and transaction that sits over Madrid in the day has gone to sleep, and what's underneath it is what was always there. The simple sound of people living in close proximity, breathing and moving and occasionally laughing. You think about tomorrow. Tomorrow the chickpeas in bone broth will reheat into something even better. Tomorrow your father goes back to the Rastro. Tomorrow your mother's cough will be better or it won't, and you'll decide then what to do about the woman at the convent. Tomorrow Anna goes to Signora Carpio's for letters, and you'll need bread and wood and the aguador twice. Tomorrow is the same as today, but today was manageable. Today you fed 5 people from a shelf with 6 things on it. Today you made something from almost nothing. The way your mother taught you and her mother taught her, and all the women in all the corrals in all the cities of Castile have been teaching each other for as long as there have been kitchens and not enough in them. You close the shutter. The fire in the hearth is coals now. Just coals. Orange in the dark kitchen, giving enough heat to make the room bearable but not enough for light. You sit by them for a moment. The warmth on your face and your cracked hands, the smell of smoke and the ghost of the blood sausage and the faint clean smell of the water you used to clean the pot. Your mother's cough comes through the wall. Once, then quiet. You sit with it. You don't move toward it. She's sleeping, or close to it, and there's nothing to do tonight that you haven't already planned for tomorrow. Sometimes care is just sitting in the dark and knowing the plan. Let me tell you what this kitchen doesn't have, because I promised you this at the beginning and I want to keep that promise. The shelf has chickpeas and garlic and onion and lard and salt. The pot is cracked and held with wire. The fire eats wood you can barely afford. The water comes from the aguador at 1 maravedì a trip because the well is dead. What the shelf doesn't have: pepper. Black pepper is a trade commodity that travels from Malabar on the coast of India to Lisbon to Madrid, and by the time it gets here, it costs what a day's work costs. You have tasted it twice in your life, both times in food you were given or served somewhere else. You know what it is. You know what it does to a pot. You will not buy it. No cinnamon. Cinnamon comes from Ceylon, also through Lisbon, also expensive. The royal kitchen uses it in sweets and in certain meat dishes. You have never owned any. No saffron, which grows in Castile, which is produced not an hour's walk from the southern edge of Madrid, which colours rice and broth to the colour of the October afternoon light, which tastes of something between hay and metal, and something you can't name. You have tasted saffron. There are years when your father comes home with a tiny paper fold of it from the market, when a vendor gave it to him for carrying something, or when the price dropped after harvest. Those are years you remember. That taste is specific and it is associated in your memory with abundance, though the amount involved is always tiny. No vinegar, not consistently. Vinegar is made from wine gone sour, and wine is something you buy sometimes and not others, and letting wine go sour on purpose to make vinegar requires having wine to spare, which you don't. No honey. Honey is a luxury, not an extreme luxury. Beekeepers exist, honey is available, some families in the corral have it occasionally, but it's something you buy when there's someone sick and you need to make a warming drink, and even then you buy the smallest amount. No cheese. The real cheese, manchego from the plateau, the hard golden wheels of it, is expensive and doesn't keep well once cut. You have eaten cheese perhaps 5 times in your memory. Your mother makes something occasionally from goat's milk when she can get it cheap, pressed in cloth until it's firm, salted, kept cold. This is not exactly cheese. It is the gesture of cheese. No fresh fish. Fish comes to Madrid dried, bacalao, salt cod, which travels all the way from the Atlantic fishing grounds to the interior of Spain preserved in salt, and is eaten across the country by everyone who can't afford fresh. Bacalao is what you eat on Fridays and on fast days, soaked overnight in cold water to remove some of the salt, then cooked simply with garlic and olive oil or in a stew. You don't have bacalao this week because you didn't have the money for it. Next week, when your father is paid, you'll buy a piece. No sugar. This is perhaps the most absolute absence. Sugar in 1650 is not a cheap commodity. It comes from Brazil and the Caribbean, from the sugar mills that run on the bodies of enslaved people, whose suffering is invisible to the woman buying a tiny paper twist of sugar at the mercado. You don't buy it. You can't buy it. Sweetness in your kitchen comes from dried fruit when you have it, from the onions when they caramelize in a hot pan, from the natural sweetness of chickpeas when they cook long enough. No fresh vegetables in October except what you can find at the Rastro. The season for fresh greens ended weeks ago. What's available now is root vegetables. Turnips, which you'll use when they're cheap enough, carrots if you're lucky, and dried legumes and preserved things. The first cabbages of winter will be coming in from the fields to the south in a few weeks, and there will be a week when cabbages are suddenly everywhere and cheap, and you'll buy as many as you can carry and make a pot of caldo gallego, if you can find the beans for it. No eggs on most days. There's a woman in the building who keeps 2 chickens in a basket on her balcony, and sells eggs at 2 maravedis each. 2 maravedis is the price of a candle. This is the calculation you make. Candle or egg. Candle is usually the answer because candle lights the evening and you need the evening. But sometimes, on a day when the accounting works out, you buy 2 eggs and you beat them into the pot toward the end of cooking, and they enrich everything. The yolk going silky in the hot broth, and your mother gets one and the children share one and your father says nothing and eats the extra bread. This is what's not there. What is there? Skill, knowledge, attention. The specific intelligence of a woman who has been making something from almost nothing for 11 years and will continue doing so for the rest of her life, and who will teach this skill to Anna and to whoever Anna teaches it to, passing it forward without names attached, the way water moves through stone without leaving a mark but still shapes everything it touches. Sunday, 2 weeks later. The weather has clarified. The clouds that brought the October rain have moved east and left behind something almost like summer. A short warm spell that Madrid gets sometimes in November. The sky so blue it looks unreal. The air thin and sharp and carrying a faint smell of the dry earth beyond the city. You have no work today. Mass in the morning, which you attend. Not performing piety, just going, the way your mother goes, the way the whole neighbourhood goes, the social and spiritual act of it impossible to separate from the practical fact that Sunday is organised around the church and you are organised with Sunday. After Mass, you have time. Anna asks to go to the Prado del Buen Retiro. This is the park to the east of the city, the Royal Park, the one that in 40 years or so will have a museum built in it that will hold the greatest collection of Spanish painting ever assembled. Right now, it's a park, open to the public on Sundays, trees and paths and the fountains that actually work, air that has less smoke in it than the San Millán air. You say yes. Your mother says yes. Even your father, who's not a man for parks, puts on his clean shirt and comes along. You walk east through the city, past the Puerta del Sol, which is not in 1650 what it will become. No grand square, just a gate that used to be there, the name remaining after the gate was demolished, but which is still the centre point, the place where roads from all directions converge, where the vendors are thickest and the noise is greatest. Past the Calle de Alcalá, which heads northeast out of the city toward the university town. Past the streets that get wider and better paved as you move east toward the neighbourhoods where the better houses are. And then the park. You've been here perhaps 4 times in your life. It's always the same small shock. The air first, the actual difference in the air when there's enough open space for it to move. Then the trees. Your neighbourhood has almost no trees. The city has almost no trees. Cities in this era are not places where trees are grown. Trees are wood, and wood burns, and the pressure on timber around any population centre is such that old growth disappears, and what replaces it is managed carefully and usually for use. The trees in the Prado del Buen Retiro are royal trees, protected trees, trees that exist because a king wanted them there, and no one was going to cut them down. You stand under a tree in October, and the leaves above you are gold and rust and a particular orange-yellow that you don't have a word for exactly. The light through them is the light through the October leaves of a real tree, scattered and warm and moving. Your father stands with his hands behind his back and looks at the fountains. He doesn't say anything. He looks at them for a long time. Anna runs. This is what 12-year-olds do when there is space. They run. She goes ahead down the path, not going anywhere specific, just going. The specific joy of a body that hasn't had enough room to move in properly and is now, briefly, in enough room. Your mother walks beside you, slowly. Her cough has been better this week, slightly better, and she's moving with less difficulty, though still carefully. You're walking at her pace, not noticing that you're doing it. There are hundreds of people in the park. Sunday in the Prado. The whole city that can walk east is here. Families, couples, young men in groups, women in groups, children everywhere. The Sunday social order of Madrid is out in force. The people with better clothes keeping to the wider paths. The people from the neighbourhoods like yours staying more to the edges, not because anyone is told to, just the natural sorting that happens when people know their place. You don't think about your place. You're not here to think about your place. You're here for the air and the trees and the fact that the accounting this week worked out and your mother's cough is slightly better and the pig share lasted through 3 pots and there was even a night when there was a little left over. A little left over. This is the metric. This is the version of abundance available to you. Not the extra leg of pork hanging from the ceiling of Doña Pilar's kitchen. Not the merchant's wife's full larder. Just a little left over. Enough to have something when tomorrow's shelf is otherwise bare. Enough to give Senora Alacon back the gesture of the tocino in kind. A little leftover is what success looks like in the Corral de las Flores. It's not glamorous. It's not enough to feed anyone who can see it. But it is measurably, meaningfully better than not enough. Anna comes running back. She's out of breath and her hair has come half out of its arrangement and she doesn't care at all. "There's a man selling roasted chestnuts," she says. Everyone looks at you. You're carrying in the small cloth pocket tied inside your shawl 12 maravedis. Emergency money, strictly speaking. Money kept for the unexpected rather than the daily cost. But you look at your family in the park in the November sunlight. Your father's hands behind his back, your mother's slightly easier breathing, Anna's disordered hair and wide eyes. "How much?" you ask. "1 maravedi for a whole cone." You think. 1 maravedi for a cone of chestnuts. A small cone, maybe 12 or 15 nuts, hot from the pan, their skins charring and splitting as you peel them, the pale dense interior giving off steam when you open it, tasting of sweet and earth and November. 5 people, 5 maravedis. 5, you say. You buy 5 cones of chestnuts from the man at the corner of the path. He has a portable brazier, charcoal, a wire pan, and the chestnuts scored across the top with a knife so they don't explode in the heat. They're ready, just done, and the heat comes through the paper cone into your hands and you hold it carefully, grateful for the warmth. Your family finds a low stone wall to sit on in the sun. 5 people eating chestnuts in the park. Anna peels hers methodically, the inner skin coming off with the outer skin when she's careful, the nut coming free whole. Thomas eats his without fully peeling them, getting bits of skin in his mouth and not caring. Your mother eats slowly, the way she eats everything, savouring. Your father eats 2, then holds out the cone to Anna, who takes 1 more, then looks at you. "Go on," you tell him. He eats the rest. You peel yours and hold the warm, dense weight of it in your palm for a moment before eating. The smell is the smell of November in Madrid, in the park, with the gold leaves overhead and the city to the west still making its particular noise, its particular smell. The chestnut tastes sweet and slightly smoky and fills your mouth fully, and you chew it slowly. Your mother catches you looking at her. "Good?" she asks. "Good?" you say. She looks back at the park. "We should come here more," she says. "We will," you say. "You probably won't." There's always something. Always the accounting to do. Always the management of what's on the shelf and what's coming in and what's going out. Always the pot, the fire, the morning calculation. But today, you're here. Today you're sitting on a stone wall in the Prado del Buen Retiro eating hot chestnuts in November sunlight with your family, and the cold is bearable because the sun is on you, and the city is distant enough that its noise is just a murmur, and your mother's cough is slightly better. This is also the kitchen. This is also what the kitchen is for. All those mornings at the cold hearth, all those calculations and negotiations and careful fires, they accumulate into this. Into a family that made it to Sunday. Into 5 maravedis for chestnuts in the park. I want to tell you about one more thing before we let the night come in. Not an event. Not a transaction. Just a fact about this kitchen that I want you to carry with you into sleep. In the year 1605, 45 years before where you're standing right now, a man named Miguel de Cervantes published the first part of a book called Don Quixote in Madrid. This book is now considered by many literary scholars to be the first modern novel. It is one of the most important pieces of writing in the Western tradition. It has been translated into more languages than almost any other book in history. Cervantes wrote it, at least in part, in poverty. Not the kind of poverty you're living. He was a man, educated, had connections, had served in the military, had seen the Mediterranean world. But he died in debt. He wrote in rented rooms. He was in jail at least once. He knew the south side of Madrid. He knew what a kitchen like yours smelled like. He knew what a pot of chickpeas from a depleted shelf tasted like. In the second chapter of Don Quixote, Cervantes describes his hero's household and its food. He says the household ate an olla of rather more beef than mutton, salad on most nights, scraps on Saturdays, lentils on Fridays, and occasionally a pigeon on Sundays. That's the diet. That's a specific, accurate description of what a modest Spanish household ate in 1605. And the famous book begins with the famous man in the famous windmill adventure, but it begins by grounding him in this: what he ate, what was in his pot, how the money worked. Because Cervantes knew that a person's kitchen is not a footnote. A person's kitchen is where the actual life is. He didn't have a name for the woman who ran it. He had a housekeeper and a niece, briefly mentioned. The characters who cook in Don Quixote are background figures, props almost, necessary to explain why the hero is the way he is, but not interesting in themselves. But the kitchen is there, the olla is there, the beans and the scraps and the occasional pigeon are there. And 45 years after Cervantes put that in his book, you're putting chickpeas in a pot on a fire in San Millán, and you're making exactly what he described, from the same limited shelf, with the same skill, for the same purpose. You are the novel's infrastructure. You are the olla that makes the knight-errant possible. The Sunday evening comes in gently. The walk back from the Prado is slower than the walk out. You let it be slow. Tomas walks ahead, hands in his pockets. The posture of a teenage boy who isn't going to admit that the afternoon was pleasant. Anna is beside you, talking about the chestnuts, talking about a girl she saw in the park in a dress she admired, talking about a bird she saw near the fountain that she thinks might have been a hoopoe, although you tell her hoopos don't winter in Madrid. And she says, "How do you know?" And you say you don't. Actually, you're just guessing, which surprises her into brief silence. Your father and mother walk behind you. You don't look back at them, but you can hear them, the low sound of their voices, your mother talking in the particular quiet way she reserves for conversations with him, the one you can't hear specifically but know the register of. The city comes back around you as you walk west. The smells first. Coal smoke, animals, the kitchen smells of 1,000 supper preparations starting up as the afternoon turns to evening. Then the noise, voices, wheels, the bells of San Milan and San Milan's neighbours starting their evening sequence. You turn into the Calle de la Paloma, the archway of the corral, the courtyard, home. That night, the last night of this week's story, you're lying on the pallet in the dark and you can hear the city outside the shutter, and Anna's breathing and the distant bells and the creak of the building settling in the cold. You are 19 years old. You've been doing the work of this kitchen since you were 8, learning it since you were old enough to stand at the hearth, absorbing it through your hands and your memory, and all those mornings at the cold shelf with the clay pot and the judgment about what to do with what you have. You are going to do this for the rest of your life. You're going to do it for your own children eventually, when there are children, and you're going to teach them what your mother taught you, the real things, the things that don't go into books. That salt goes in late. That cold water makes broth, and hot water makes soup. That garlic goes in whole when you have time and crushed when you don't. That you don't waste a marrow bone. That Signora Alacon's generosity comes back to her, and that you don't keep a ledger but you do keep faith. You're going to do this in a kitchen that might be this one, might be a slightly better one if the calculations keep going your way, might be worse if they don't. You can't know. The future is as dark as the room around you. But here is what you know. You know the difference between a good pot and a bad one, which is mostly time and attention, and a small amount of the right fat at the right moment. You know how to manage a fire on 7 sticks of wood. You know where the Rastro is at 9 in the morning, and which cellars are honest and which ones aren't, and which ones have scraps under the table if you ask with the right tone. You know your mother's cough and what it means and what you're going to do about it. You know this building, these walls, this courtyard, this street. You know which step is crumbled on the 4th from the bottom and which window on the 3rd floor has a broken shutter that bangs in the wind and who the noise belongs to and whether they need checking on. You know the 5 things on the shelf and what each of them can become. This knowledge is worth something. This knowledge is worth everything. It has kept this family alive in a city that does not particularly want people like you to stay alive, that would prefer you to be invisible, to service it from the back rooms and the ground floor apartments and the corrals and the carrying and the cleaning, to produce the empire's daily bread and never be named for doing it. You produce it anyway. You're warm. Not warm enough. October in Madrid, the blanket thin, the cold floor below, but warm enough. The fire is coals and won't go out until morning. You are fed. The chestnuts in the park and the blood sausage and the chickpea broth that was better than it had any right to be given what it was made from. You are tired. The particular tired of a week that went well, a week where the calculations held, where the pot was right, where your mother is slightly better and your father has bones for next week's broth, and your sister ran in the park. The bells of San Milan ring for Compline. 9 o'clock, the last bells of the day, the bells that say, it's done, the day is done, sleep now. The city listens to the bells the way it always does, with one ear, and keeps going. Madrid doesn't stop at 9, it doesn't stop at midnight, it doesn't stop, but it quiets. And in the quieting you're already there ahead of it. Your eyes are heavy. The room is cold and small, and smells of smoke and garlic and this week's cooking and all the weeks before it, and the decades of women who cooked in this room, or one exactly like it in every corral in San Milan, and in every corral in every poor quarter of this empire that rules half the world from a high dry plateau in the centre of Spain. They were all here before you. They will all be here after you. The olla will be on the hook. The fire will be on the coals. The salt will go in late. The garlic will go in whole. This is not nothing. This is everything. Let the sounds go now. Let the bells do what bells do, which is mark time and then fall quiet. Let the cold be just cold, not threatening, just the edge of the season that is manageable, the season you have wood for. Let your hands rest. Let the knuckle that's been cracked all week stop stinging. Let the back straighten out against the palate. Let Anna's breathing fill the close dark air of the room. Tomorrow is the same fire, the same shelf, the same calculation, the same 5 people who need feeding who will be fed. You've done this before. You'll do it again. And the cracked pot on the hook, and the coals in the hearth, and the 6 things on the shelf, and the knowledge in your hands, and your mother's voice saying salt goes in late. All of it is still here. All of it is still working. 400 years later, the woman standing in her kitchen at whatever hour this is, looking at what's on her shelf, wondering what she can make of it. She's doing the same thing, different shelf, same hands, same calculation, same tiredness at the end of a week that went well enough, same fire coming down to coals, same dark, same rest. The bells stop. Let yourself go. The city keeps moving, the way it always does, but you don't need to keep moving with it anymore tonight. The pot is clean. The fire is managed. The 5 people are fed and warm enough and sleeping or almost sleeping. You've done your job. You always do. Let it get quieter now, and quieter. The bells are gone. The voices are gone. The wheels and the carts and the aguador and the leñatero are all gone until morning, and morning is a long way off. Let the darkness do what it came here for. Let the cold stay outside. Let the garlic smell and the smoke smell and the bone broth smell just be the air for kitchen that worked today, that fed people today, that will be here tomorrow to do it again. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. That's enough. That has always been enough. Good night.